Okay. So this is sort of riffing on a talk I gave late last year in Austria as a part of this festival, their discourse section. And basically, normally when I will give a talk, I'll have a modular synthesizer with a patch, and I will either play through the patch, talk about the patch, reverse engineer the patch. I've done it a few different ways. This time I didn't bring my system, and so I'm just going to talk, and I'd like you to talk as well. Essentially, the meat of the matter is, as far as artistic process is concerned, as far as deals with me, I utilize a modular synthesizer for a good portion of my work. And the reason that I have come to using a little louder the reason that I've come to, I'll just rest the mic on my chin. The reason that I've come to use modular synthesizers with my work is, so when I started doing the particular body of work that I've been involved with in the last 10 years, the idea was to create a space within a space. It's performative and also meant to get into these ideas of trance and intuition and basically getting inside of yourself. And I would utilize my voice, and that was sort of the main instrument that I would focus on, was the human voice. And modular synthesizers, as it turns out, are best to couple with the human voice because of the fact that they are so organic in nature, and they're built on electricity. Everything is control voltage, and humans are made up of electricity, so it's this nice cyclical thing that happens. And also the fact that the modular synthesizer as an instrument, as a tool, gives anyone a creative outlet no matter what. And it also ties into this sort of chip I have on my shoulder about academia or the conservatory, and learning how to do things a very specific way, and having been taught that is the only way to do things, which I think is totally ridiculous, especially within the construct of the 21st century. Modular synthesizers can produce all sorts of sounds. They're extremely varied, and you can do whatever you want with them. And within the realm of creative process, it can't really be invalidated, as much as someone would say, oh, well, that's not tuned to A440, or that's not in this particular scale. I think that's a ridiculous notion, because of the fact that art is not something that is quantifiable or qualifiable. Everyone has a particular impression within the experience of art, whether it's their own or others. And to say that something is wrong or invalid because it doesn't necessarily fall into the Western 12-note scale is super ridiculous. And yeah, basically that's it. And the fact that it's not exclusive, and it's not, or at least it shouldn't be, an elitist thing, because everyone has the potential to create something with this particular tool and do it in their own way. And whether it's noisy or whether it's melodic or whether it's percussive, doesn't matter. it's all due to what that individual, what compels that individual. And yeah, so because I didn't have anything really planned for this, I sort of wanted to put it into the realm of discussion, or if anyone has any questions about anything, I'm here to talk. Yes? Turn it up a little bit. I can do that. Yes?
If somebody's new to the realm of modular synthesizer, how would they go about it to learn about it?
Well, I'm going to stand behind. That's not going to help any either. Repeat the question. The question was, if someone's interested in getting into modular synthesis, what's the way in? Say it again.
What would be the best way to go about it again?
What would be the best way to go about it? There is no best way to go about it. That's my answer. I'm a part of Control, who are some of the folks. We were some of the folks that are put on this fair, and people will come into the shop and ask that question. It's not an easy question to answer because of the fact that it's something that's super open-ended, and it depends first on what you want or need the instrument to do. So if it's something where you want to just learn about synthesis, I could recommend a signal source like an oscillator, some sort of equalization like a filter, an amplifier, an envelope to modulate the signal, and those are some basic building blocks. But all in, there's no wrong way to do anything, so it really depends on that individual and what that individual wants to be able to create, or the path that they want to go down. And they can explore, they can get off that track and explore different things, but first you need to understand that you should know what you want to do.
That was mentioned in an earlier talk. There was another man that was talking about, I just don't take this a bad way, but the lack of documentation for modules that are out there right now. And for someone who is new, he was mentioning how they're resource-wise, what there is to learn about it. There are obviously a lot of videos, there's a community, there's Modular out there where people are very helpful and some people are dicks, but most of them are helpful. But for people who, the traditional way to learn is to be taught or to read something about it. And if that information isn't available widely, especially not delivered by manufacturers, then how would someone go about at least learning some of the basics?
Okay, well, there are a couple things I could say to that. There was a book written by a fellow called Alan Strange in 1972 called Electronic Music. It's sort of a rare book, and when you find copies of it, it's expensive.
I have a PDF of it, if anyone
someone
wants it.
put a PDF online that you can download for free, and it's quite a comprehensive book. I think it's around 200 pages long, and so that reading through that text would give you the theory and understanding the signal path and basic building blocks for that sort of thing. Also, since we live in the age of the internet, there's a website called patchpierre.net, and that website has, the fellow that does that website has gone through making a series of videos explaining the VCO, the voltage controlled oscillator, what that does, what it is, and the next is the VCF, the voltage controlled filter, so on and so forth. So if you're more of a visual learner, then you can look on that website, and there are a series of short demonstrations, tutorials on what the individual modules are, the function of those are. So that would be my answer to that.
So you mentioned that you think that the current sort of model of academia isn't working for electronic physics. Oh, okay.
I didn't say that. I said, so this is where it gets slippery, because I appreciate and enjoy the academic realm as much as I enjoy particular traditions and systems. But this is coming from the standpoint completely from a creative or artistic standpoint, and that being understanding these things in a very fixed way is not bad whatsoever. I think it's awesome. My problem is with the way these things are taught, sort of institutionally, the way these things are taught. Sometimes you will have an instructor that will say, okay, this is how you utilize this particular instrument, and there's no way around that. Or this is how, as far as the creation of something, it's down to the individual, and I wholly believe that. Whether or not anybody else likes it is another story altogether. Like, as long as you're compelled to make these things, that's the most important thing. Because, if you're trying to appease others with what you're doing, then I guess you can do that. It's just not. I have no interest in that.
Well, so I think we're actually on the same page, but so the question would be, if it were up to you, how would you structure an undergraduate electronic music program?
Well, the thing that mainly bugs me is the fact that people are told there's only one way to do this certain thing. If you teach that thing and say, okay, you have the information now, you have that particular skill set, do what you want with it, and not say, okay, well, from now on, you live inside of this box. It's as simple as that. For me, yes.
Question. So I'm a rapper, right? So I caught on the rap. He was a rapper. He was around me rap. He was in Harlem, and if I wanted to, I could look up on YouTube, ciphers, battles, all that stuff. It set a context for me. Music radios, all that stuff. And it's like a new area for me as far as learning how it works. Like, if I was looking for like a reference point for how the culture looks, the context looks, what's something like that I can point to for this kind of medium?
Something to give a particular context.
Yeah, cause like now you just myself, I wanted to share with others. Like,
right.
Just how it looks, the lifestyle, how it looks. And if you want, we can follow up later on. Like that,
yeah, I'll have to think about that for a second. Yeah, it's open if anybody knows anything specific.
Like just YouTube and the forums,
yeah,
part of the community, just kind of like it was said earlier, knowing. You kind of have to know what you want and what you want to go for when it comes to like starting to learn an instrument. But just like learning about the culture and the music, all of that, it's just a work. The internet's one thing. You just find one video and watch the next one. There's a lot of people who do beginner videos all over the place. There are a lot of people frustrated with not knowing where to start.
Right.
And there are absolutely no rules in this scene and in this industry. Right. It's just you start where you start. One thing just going on like education that I wanted to bring up is like this is a the only instrument that I've ever played where it's not taught by learning something. It's not taught by learning like a cover song. Like when you learn how to play guitar when you're in the 4th grade, the first thing like a guitar player teacher will do is like, what song do you like? I'll teach you how to play it, and then you feel really good about yourself as you play it. Modular is like, I mean, especially modular, Synths in general, this kind of scene is like, this is how you make this. Now go for it. Right. And it's all about just like experimentation. And if you want to make hip hop with it, you want to make dance music with it, that's great. But if you don't have to.
Are there any like particular communities of synthesizers or whatever where they view it?
Muffler is the biggest forum out there, and that's where everybody goes.
It's a super weird name. But like, and like you get there and it's like there's the first 30 minutes they changed it now, but it used to be the cover page was a cat. You had to know like, click on the cat. But it's just like, like that's like how you get there. And then, like he said, I mean, some people are nice, some people aren't. But like you just ask a question, and if you're in the wrong forum, someone will tell you to move. But it's really good to learn, and you're doing the right class.
Another good place to start is Sound on Sound and some secrets. I forget the name of it. It's a series of articles that explains like synthesis and like different components. It's more geared towards like subtractive synthesis. And the other good thing to read is Wikipedia, honestly, because a lot of the modular stuff is either a lot of it's based around subtractive, but there's other synthesis types. There's granular mod things or FM, and just like learning about like different characters of synthesis and how they work. And I know some people will probably object strongly to this, but sometimes using like a software modular is a good way to get a feel for like how things work and what we can buy.
Not at all. No, that's it's all they're all tools. It's all in how you utilize it.
So some people have this hate for software, but if you like learn, you can learn. Some of them have like a lot of the typical modules that you have, and you can learn what different ones do, and then you can conceive like without spending like thousands of dollars, you can conceive like what kind of instrument you would want, and then you're like, okay, well I want to transfer to the hardware interface. So
as well, control the store, like the actual store is you can go in there and sit all day, and I'll talk to you all day. You don't have to talk, you can go in and just it's all about listening. It's about attentive listening, and then you'll start to get the fine tune what sound what might work.
Yeah, and there's always sort of the point of that shop is to be a resource. Like we're not car salesmen.
Yeah.
Like I could give a fuck about making a sale. It has to do with letting people understand what these things are. That's why this fair is happening, so people can come in, discuss with the people that manufacture and design these things what they are, and have them give them a demo, so you understand how it sounds, how it operates, how you interface with it yourself.
Kind of in line with what you said about academia.
Yes.
Arnold Schoenberg, 12-tone composer, in one of his books said that he spent a lot of his time after graduating unlearning the things that he had learned in his studies.
Absolutely.
Because it was sort of against what he wanted to compose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly it. Like I said, I have no problem with academia in the way that you're able to learn a certain thing, learn a certain technique, but in the end, as far as the creative process is concerned, it's more about creating and honing your own technique. Like everyone should have their own technique. Why should you adhere to any particular system? Not that they're wrong, not that they're bad, but that's not the end all be all. It's that simple.
And about what you said about because I hear a lot of people asking about resources and like why isn't this available and why isn't that available. I mean, you probably know. I mean, if you flash back 7 years, you could count on one hand how many videos were out there on Modular.
Right.
Period.
Absolutely.
And this video thing, it's still kind of in its infancy. mean, even the people that are making them haven't really been around that long.
Right.
Myself included.
Yeah, and you actually do you do a lot of videos.
Well, I said that this video thing, it's very close to in its infancy. Like, if you flash back 7 years, you could only count how many videos were out there on Modular, probably on one hand. And we're all used to having this kind of consumerism mentality of, well, if I want to learn this, I go grab this book, or if I want to watch this, I need to go watch this video. And, even my channel, like, it doesn't have everything. I've never said it has everything. But
by the way, what is your channel called?
Modular Wild.
Modular Wild, which is another good resource.
But I built it after, I heard Morton Subotnick talk, and he said that back in the 50s there was literally nothing. There was like Air Force manuals on electronics, and that's how him and Buchla got all the synthesizer stuff started, was using Air Force manuals on technology. So, I mean, we're actually very fortunate, and if, more people kind of took the incentive to make videos the way they think they should be,
right, then
we would get more contributors. Because I know when I started doing it, then we have people like DivKid jumping in, and, other people like Ken Flux, and then all these other people. The more people are talking about it, the more the community grows, and then that ultimately is what will sort of get us there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like I said, we are in the 21st century, so there's no reason for it not to happen.
Right.
I'm kind of interested in your process and the way that you utilize Modular. You brought up this element of trance. In my experience, and I think the building blocks of modular synthesis, everybody has to understand to even make something, even to produce a sound. And there's a certain critical thinking that goes about just to get to even a signal. How do you, when you're removing yourself from that in the element of trance or in the mindset of trance, how do you go about your process of combining those two? One being the complete removal of the state of mind, and one being the application of a scientific calculation. And how does Modular facilitate trance if you still have that backbone to it?
Well, okay, that's a very good question. So when I started using modular synthesizers, I had been toying with the idea of building a system, and I started to buy a few things. I got a case, I bought a few modules that I thought might be interesting, and like I said, also I'm an improviser, so the easiest way for me to process that was to start doing live performance in front of an audience, not knowing exactly what I was doing. And for me, that it helped to push me in a certain way. And so initially I was actually very concentrated on what was happening inside of the synthesizer. But as time has gone on, I not only have gotten more comfortable with the instrument itself, but in how particular modules would be utilized inside of a patch. And so it's something that it honestly becomes very zen for me, being able to patch in real time within a space and in a very live. It's also about moments. I'm fully of the mind that moments are super important, and letting those moments exist where they are and then dissipate is something that's great, because everyone will take away a memory which is only an approximation of that thing that actually happened. So no one will view it quite in the same way, and no one will remember it quite in the same way. And I think that that's something really interesting and beautiful. And when you're inside of these moments in this space, it's something that's very special. And also the way that I move is fairly patient. In the way that I patch, it's not very maximalist. So it's different than I think a lot of what you will see out of modular synthesizers. So it's become this thing for me where that patience, that slowing down within the process of utilizing a modular synthesizer and really building and feeding off of that electricity that it's kicking out and then putting back into it, that's something that does for me, again, become a trance.
Do you feel like it's more of the workflow of the modular system or more of the sonic characteristic?
I think it's a combination of the two, absolutely. The quality of synthesizers and the human voice, like I said, which was my main instrument, couple so well together. It's nice because I find moments where I don't know where the voice is and where the synthesizer is, and I like being able to that idea of that not knowing is something that's really nice for me. And this sort of idea of the illusion, which is also something that I feed into, where someone that's witnessing what's happening in that real time doesn't know if that's my voice or if that's the synth.
Sure.
Yes?
You mentioned earlier that like breaking out of traditional like Western tonal scales is like one example where this approach to creating sound sort of shines, but do you have any examples more in the realm of like creative patches around like temporal generation or sequencing, maybe incorporating external objects outside the modular system that give like a sort of really demonstrate where this open-ended nature of the system can shine? Maybe that would help.
Yeah, and this is where I probably should have brought a system so I could actually patch it.
Just like anything you can remember that might have been like particularly interesting.
I really love low-pass gates. I'm a huge fan of low-pass gates. Low-pass gates are basically like a combination of a filter and an amplifier that are Vactral-based circuits. And because Vactrals, which are light-sensitive op-amps, don't have a hard opening and closing, it has a nice soft entry and a soft exit, so it becomes very round and bouncy, and echoes something acoustic. So that's something I also like, playing with this idea of physical modeling inside of a synthesizer using an analog circuit, which I think is really nice and warm. And timbrally, I think they really shine. So that's one thing. That's one thing I like. Yes.
I know you say you don't like software patching.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. I thought you. But I've been, just experimenting with synthesis on software because it's just easier for me to,
absolutely
do it. And I was just curious. Like I've been learning that there's like, infinite possibilities in terms of the carrier, the modulator, and you can basically do almost anything. And I was wondering, like you just said, the low pass gate. What are your other like favorite synthesis techniques?
Ooh, I really like Carplus Strong. There's a lot. I don't know if I could really peg down specific things.
Three favorite. I was just kidding.
But one thing I should bring up, which I didn't, and shame on me, is the idea that these instruments are sort of limitless. They are sort of boundless in a way. And so it's up to the user to self-edit. I think the most important thing is to, when engaging with the instrument, to set up parameters for yourself and not sort of bleed outside of those parameters. And talking about being inside of a box, it's a little different because you determine the box. And then once you've finished with that, then you can slide the box over and have something else inside of it. And so I think being able to, I know Reed Hayes was talking about large systems earlier in his talk. And large systems are something that I've personally never considered because the nature of what I do is generally performative, and I do travel a lot, so I need something that I can contain in a small case that I can walk onto a plane with. So, but that's personally for me what I do. So inside of that, every module is very considered. And so then I work with inside of those parameters for each particular performance. I think it is good to not think of the instrument in such a broad way and think of it as something smaller, manageable, that you can maintain, really get inside of it, understand what those things do, and then once you have had time to really let that settle, then you can move on to other things. Yes.
What was your first experience with a modular synthesizer, and was it something you owned yourself, or was it something someone else had, or how did you get into it?
No, it was I guess the first the first time I dealt with anything modular, it was semi-modular. I bought a Korg MS-10, and I sort of played around with that for a few years, and then after that was an ARC 2600, and then after that I started playing around with Eurorack synthesizers. So yeah, it was probably in my early 20s that I started with semi-modular systems.
I know we talked about a bunch of beginner resources of how to get into, learn what an oscillator ECF does. I think we haven't really touched on what the gentleman behind me was mentioning earlier, is how to get into the community, how to get a feel for what these things can do.
Right.
I think that's just like seeing live performances, maybe online even.
Tonight.
Yeah, like tonight.
Yeah.
Exactly. So is there anything that like inspired you, like any kind of performance or like recorded piece, to like look into this stuff? Do you know how?
I think, fairly early on, I heard Morton Subotnick's Silver Apples of the Moon, and I heard Switched on Bach by Walter, now Wendy Carlos.
Laurie Anderson.
What's that?
Laurie Anderson with the voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was Superman. All that stuff was super great, and my introduction to synthesis was probably those things at a fairly young age, and yeah, it was something that always resonated with me, particularly. So yeah.
Like riffing on that, like what to do is like a place like Control. I know personally for me, and because we like mind jam there, and it really helped me figure out what do I want to do, because like I knew about synthesis and I knew about music, came from a musical background, and so but I didn't know how I would achieve my musical goals, and I didn't even know what my musical goals were. So I just kind of like started messing with stuff in Control, and then realized, oh well, okay, I'll put something together like this, and then I put something together, and then I realized, oh man, I got to sell half of this shit because it's not what. Now I know what I want, you know, and you just. It seems like this whole thing is just a hands-on thing. You just got to do it. And
it's absolutely hands-on. Yeah.
Where you can easily trade off a module like nothing. You can sell somebody who wants it, and then you have your cash again. We don't even require this like more academic, like written or resources, because it's an experiential thing.
Right.
And like any reading I did, I read because I couldn't afford it. I read for 2 years before I bought anything. None of that reading taught me anything. They're talking to these guys here who know their shit until I started just doing it.
Yeah.
Until I'm in the zone, home, alone, and then it's like, okay.
Right. Well, and like I said, when I first started using modular synthesizers, when I first started purchasing them, once I had enough modules to do something with, I immediately started to do live performances, and that for me, like lighting the fire in that way, pushed me forward, and that obviously will not work for everyone, but that was my way in.
I just want to riff on that a little bit. I totally agree that like for anybody interested in getting into modules and modular synth in general, it's totally a hands-on approach. And the reason I say that is because you can read and you can watch videos and you can see things and you can hear things, but you don't know how they work for you in any sense. And I think that the best outlet to do that is like buying things used at a value that you can resell them if you don't like the investment, and just like trying things. Like if I go to Control to buy a module, I don't spend a lot of time unless I'm really trying to like get in depth with one, because I know that I'm not going to really utilize it until I figure out how it works into my system, how I want to use it, and what it does for me. And if it's something that I don't dig, I just get rid of it. And like it's the swap, it's the trade, there are people trading all the time or just selling for the same value that you bought it for. I think that's like a super important approach, and also just talking about things and like figuring out your ideas and what you really want to accomplish. For beginners, that's a huge, huge thing. Because it's really easy to get into like the gear lust phase, and like I am, you know, I'm a product of that. I totally do that, but there's also this sense that like you spend time with stuff, you understand it, you process it, and then eventually like if it's not worth it to you, you might get rid of it.
Yes. So I've been at this for, I don't know, a year and a half now, and I've got the basics down, but now, you know, I'm trying to figure out, I guess, some of the more unfamiliar details, like something has DC coupled input or something like that. I mean, I could go read an electronics book, sure, but is there anywhere that we can find electronics that's really just geared towards the module? Something short, you know, it's easy to comprehend.
Unfortunately, I don't necessarily have an answer for that. I feel that manufacturers should probably publish manuals that give a deeper explanation of the intricacies of their designs for whatever particular module there is, but I couldn't say right off the bat that I know of a specific resource that would be sort of short and sharp and to the point, which is unfortunate. But also the idea of the sense of discovery is something that is quite grand. Yes.
To that, Paul Schreiber, who's downstairs with Synthesis Technologies, he originally came out with these as kits, and he had extremely detailed explanations of what was happening electrically, as well as the theory of what he called the theory of operation for each of the modules. I don't know if he has those available online or anything. I have mine are in a binder, you know, because they came as paper. But you might see if those are available. He's extremely knowledgeable, and he was a designer for TND, Radio Shack. So he has a very good way of explaining things. If not, what was the name again? Paul Schreiber. He's the bald guy closer to the door with the.
He has the oscilloscope.
Yeah, he has the oscilloscope. He's a good resource.
To that, man, it's just like, don't be afraid to send an email to anyone. Manufacturers, like, send them an email and ask. Like, if you don't understand what they're doing, like, manufacturers are not focused on making really pretty manuals and stuff, and that's a problem with this industry, because it's so small that manufacturers can't afford to pay people to like make really awesome manuals and stuff, but they'd be happy to riff with you on a conversation via email and let you know like what's going on.
Or phone.
Right.
Yeah, or phone. I mean, like, just send them an email and then they'll give you a call.
I spent 20 hours on the phone with Paul Schreiber. You know, I mean, you know, I paid for his modules, but you know.
I will say this: it doesn't have to be a print manual, and it doesn't have to have a lot of flourishes and images. The manufacturer can make a comprehensive manual and put it up on their website as a PDF. That's also another thing that could happen more often. It does happen, and it happens a lot, but it could happen a little more often.
Absolutely, but if it's not available, just feel free just to ask, man. We're all just dudes that are just doing the industry. It's like no one's like a mega corporation except for they're getting into it now, or have the same exact questions that everyone.
And even something like, they're not really good, you know.
Yeah, but you know what I mean by that. It's just like, it's like everybody says the big ones, but you know, still like compared to like my company.
Okay, I just want you to come up here and listen to you, but listen to all this just to provide some contrasts. Setting up boundaries by buying a hardwired synth is a very helpful way to understand synthesis for starting. I learned pre-internet in New Jersey, surrounded by Bon Jovi, and no one was helping. And look, even if you don't buy it, go to a store and look at the way a hardwired synth is set up. That can at least give you a starting point, and then you talk to someone like Robert, someone who really knows what you're talking about, watch videos, and then you can get really crazy with it. That's not the worst thing in the world, right? To get an idea, maybe even of what you want to avoid first, by looking at a hardwired synth, because it'll explain the way each module works. You could just look and listen and sort of, sometimes it's easier than just having an individual module. I mean, you walked into a shop and just bought only a filter, only a low-pass gate.
Yeah.
And then went home and watched it play.
Right.
You know, that would have been kind of a strange way to start your purchase.
Right. No, for sure.
So yeah, so that's not the worst thing. And also to respond to someone said something about covers.
Yeah.
That's not the worst thing either. I know it's like sounds really close-minded, but Vince Clarke was downstairs earlier. I learned everything I knew by listening to old Yaz, Depeche Mode records, trying to emulate them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the opposite of Savantnik and Buble. It's like very simple timbres, but it wasn't the worst way to learn exactly.
Yeah.
It's very simple, and then you could go from there.
And I'm not discounting that at all.
But just as a suggestion, just a modular synth player, not a hardwired synth player.
Right. Yeah.
Just go to control and talk to campus.
Did you approach your compositional process any different when you did the Make Noise record versus?
I did. Well, in a way. When I did the two compositions for the Make Noise Shared System 45, obviously the parameters were set. You were given a system. You were not to utilize anything outside of that system. And so I think I might have been the only person in that series that stuck to the rules. I think everybody else used some sort of external source. Some people made a patch, sent it into a program, recorded it, fed it back into the patch and to create a feedback loop. Others used external instruments, blah blah. So when I made that, when I made those pieces, I got the synth, I set it down in my living room, and it sat there for 2 weeks. And it was a matter of just looking at it and thinking about it, looking at it and thinking about it. And then after 2 weeks was up, I pulled it out. I started to patch it, plugged it into my computer, I hit record, and I just made a patch, which is sometimes, most of the time, basically my body of work is based on real-time performances of, and so even the recordings are time-based. But that was a specifically interesting one because I had to stay within the confines that someone else had set up for me. And there were certain utilities that I didn't have access to that I could not utilize outside of the synthesizer. So I had to troubleshoot on the fly how to, I can maybe use this as a mix, and I could maybe mult this here and then send it over there. And so it was an interesting way to problem solve. Even though I was operating within the sort of normal process in a way that I have, I was coming at it from a slightly different angle, which was really interesting and nice. It's always nice to have your exercise different parts of your brain. And so, yeah.
getting back on that brain thing, with something I was thinking with that. We talk about how it's kind of a left brain, right brain sort of thing. It feels like when with the trance, right? So the trance is like your right brain, let's just say, right? But the analytical thing, is the left. But really, it's sort of like any virtuoso of any instrument has the two integrated. They've done their analytical stuff enough that it just becomes a thing that happens with the trance. I mean, it's like John Coltrane, all those changes he was playing with giant steps when this became like groundbreaking. I mean, he wasn't calculating that stuff anymore. No. He was feeling it because he had practiced nonstop.
Right.
So,
well, this is something that I brought up right at the beginning, which was intuition, and I try to focus on just being intuitive and just letting it roll out. I've been doing these things for long enough, and so I just let it happen. And I think that that's something that, for me, it works very well.
Have you ever broken a patch live?
I have actually. There have been very few performances where something has gone wrong, but also these sort of ideas, these mistakeisms, I call them, only feed into what's happening in that moment, because it is that moment.
Everything I do is a mistake, so I just...
Well, I wouldn't believe that for a second, but that's also a part of the process. I don't necessarily know where it's going all the time, or most of the time, and when it veers off in a different direction, I don't try to write it. I drift with it. Yeah. Yes.
Funny, I just walked in kind of late, but right as soon as I came in the room, we were talking about buying equipment and getting used to it, hands-on. I don't know anything about, well, I know some stuff about all this, but I bought my first modular today, or module unit, and I don't know, I don't see the sense of searching up on the internet sounds and stuff like this and all this stuff. And it is going to take a few dollars out of my pocket to really understand things I buy and stuff like that. But and then if you're stuck with it, you're stuck with it. Try to work with it. You know what I mean? And that's basically my attitude with what I just bought. A Snazia FX drone bag or whatever. Who knows if it's going to be integrated, if it can integrate with my setup. I don't know. I'm working with a sampler right now, just a SP404SX and mixer and an old Yamaha FD01 synthesizer. Who knows if it's going to go along with that? But like you said over there, maybe I'll trade it or something if I don't find it interesting, or if it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta, I don't know, I had to make that step. I got into the stuff because, I don't know, it stresses like individuality, I feel like.
That's where this started.
I would rather buy something small than a big unit from a big company.
Very good. Yes.
Do you have any special ways that you keep track of your patches? Like, do you ever have to deconstruct a patch and then have to reconstruct the same patch for specific things? Or
the only time I really had to do that was, well, I guess I've had to do it a couple times, but one time in particular, actually for the Make Noise Shared System 45, when I gave a talk in Asheville at Make Noise, I reconstructed the patch on the spot and played through it. And it's just from through the course of doing these things over and over again, and just remembering in my head where they were at, I can sort of get back to there fairly easily. But yeah.
What do you think are some cool modules? Like, what do you think? What are your faves now?
Right now, I really love the Dinky's Tycho from ALM. I really love the Tel Harmonic from Make Noise, and the Mysteron from Make Noise, and the Rix Mix and the Fixed Filter Bank from Make Noise. The Tango Quartet from ALM. The Doppler, the new delay from SSF WMD, is really nice. Those are a few.
Are there certain techniques or tools you think that are somewhat underappreciated, the things that people should be learning early up that tend to get perhaps subordinated to the things that are a little more fun, a little more immediate gratification?
No, like I said, I feel that it's better to create your own technique. Whatever you find is most useful for you. Nothing is invalid. That's the whole point of this. Everything has its merit. So I couldn't necessarily say that there are any specific things that I think are underutilized or sort of left out in the cold. Everything has its day.
All right, so like if back to this instrumental thing, if somebody's playing an instrument, and they're improvising, you tend to hear something and you do it because you hear it, and you know what you need to do generally to get to what kind of thing you're hearing, and then it's about like chasing that fox or whatever around. Sure. It's like zoning with that. So what's your process internally? Because I remember, a year or two ago seeing you set up at Silent Barn, and you set, your case is totally, it's like a 12U, and it was all unpatched, and you sat down for like 15 minutes, and you patched something up, and then you went, and then you kept going. Like, are you hearing something, or is it like a setup in your head,
No, I'm not hearing anything. I think it has to do with, like I said, this idea of having, setting up self-editing and having particular parameters for yourself and considering everything that's inside of the case. So everything inside of the case, I know what it does. And so on the spot in that moment, I say, maybe this will do this, maybe this will do this, and then I go from there. Yeah. So it has more to do with, like I said, understanding what you have in front of you, what I have in front of me, because that's my process.
Different for everyone. Yeah.
Everybody's different. I always patch cold.
Yeah.
Every performance, I patch from a blank slate.
That's so, I don't know what the word is, but there's so much respect for that. I've gotten into it only this year, like hard. And for me, it's been very inspirational because I just come up with a game. I'm like, oh, well, this will do this and this will do this. Like, I don't hear something first, It's a process of exploration the whole time. Yeah. And it's then maybe I'll hear something and I'll say, well, how can I do that? Yeah. But everything starts with just I wonder what happened if I did this.
Well, it's the sense of discovery, which is something that I think modular synthesizers lend themselves to.
Yes.
Yes.
I agree with that, and I feel like there's a certain part that just gets ingrained in like your methodology and your process, and you start to understand like what your system does. And I agree. Like the same time, even if I'm just patching in my bedroom, like I can't start with anything. I just like I have to remove it. And it's the same way if I go into controller stuff here. Like people have a patch set up, like I can't work with that because that's not how my mind goes, and I have no idea what anybody has done to that. I have no idea what's affecting what, and I don't want to trace everything. Like I gotta go with my own intuition. I think that's something that's very important to like the data process of modular. And it's the same, like you're just recording something, you edit and edit and edit, and then eventually there's a point you're like, alright, I think this patch is like where it's at, like as far as it's gonna go, and then you start to transform it into something else. So that's very fun.
Yes. Kind of like opposite vibe of that too. Like I play pop music in a band. I use modular, and so I have the WDSSM monolith, and then I have another row on top of that, and I have it set up in switches where I set the monolith up pretty much the same every single time, and it's like I know exactly what I'm going to do, and it's going to be a saw wave filtered just mono synth, and then I'm going to have modulation, and that's pretty much it. And then I have my second rack, and I just set it up differently every single time, and like I play pop music, but I play the same songs every single time the same way, so I have to figure out ways to escape that and to do something new and be expressive with it, and that's like a really cool thing about modular. And once you understand, like, I mean, it's so hard to look at right away, but once you understand it, it's also really awesome to like try and hear something in your head, build it, and be like, all right, now I'm gonna turn the volume up. I love patching without hearing. And then like, oh my god, that sounds really cool. And I'm like working with enough stuff to make a whole patch. But like, you know, like you can, modular is so cool in that way, and synthesizer is so cool in that way, but especially modular is like, yeah, I mean, like you can completely escape the scale, or you can adhere to it. And I mean, it's just like not to be forgotten that if you want to make a very simple patch, that you can do that. And if you want to make like an acid baseline, you can do that. But if you want to go out there, you can do that too. It's just really beautiful.
So, oh yeah.
Sorry, this might be really potential, whatever someone asks. But going back to what you said before about academia, I'm very curious. Do you think I've been playing with synthesizers now for like 30 plus years. I have no musical training whatsoever. We were talking before about, I mean, our synthesists, our people who do this kind of stuff, should we be referring to ourselves as musicians? Should we be referring to our modulars as instruments? It seems to insult people in academia who studied music. Are we just like, really just like sticking a finger up their ass and saying, hey, you know, here you go, and it upsets them? Should we find a new vocabulary for what it is that we do here? You said some wonderful stuff, I agree with everything. I'm just curious if you think there's like a whole other language by which we, who don't have the training that maybe a great guitar player and some of the other instrumentalists have, that we should be coming at this, have to be taken more, I don't want to say seriously, but understood.
Well, I'll say this. I have been making music, sound, whatever, for over 25 years myself. I've never referred to myself as a musician. I have no formal training. I utilize a lot of different instruments. Other people will refer to me as a musician, and to that, you know, I say, I don't know, whatever. You can call yourself whatever you want. If it makes somebody upset, fuck them. It's that simple. It's
people don't. Sorry, go ahead.
What I was going to say is this: the idea of these classifications, like these people set up these classifications. You're over here, you do this. You're over here, you do this. You're over here. It's stilted. It doesn't make any sense. It again puts you in a box. Just because, you know, my process has a lot to do with making sound, but I do other things as well. So that's why I don't necessarily call myself a musician, because that immediately pigeonholes me into this thing, and I do this thing. I do this, and I do that, and I do some other stuff. So I do what I do. There's no, you know...
But even our systems, like we refer to them as our systems. The systems are always a work in progress.
Yeah.
You know, it's never, the violin's done. It's got the strings, here's the bow, you're done.
Yeah.
But with our systems, we're always changing this out, putting this into this.
Sure.
We need another name for it. Maybe we should refer to it as an instrument. Maybe it bugs people who have violins and guitars, and they are instruments, and I don't deny that. But I don't know what we have, and I'm fascinated.
And it can bug them all. It can bug them as much as...
I know that violins were evolved way slower.
Yeah.
But they did evolve.
Right, of course.
So it's the same thing. We look at it from our point. So a violin's been a violin forever, but a violin hasn't been a violin forever.
Right.
I think they're all instruments. I think conservatory. I think a lot of times it's the people who teach in conservatory that are bad. But I think getting all the getting information is always good.
Absolutely. And I totally agree.
You are whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it can make music, and it can make noise. But you know what? A violin can make noise too.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
And also, what's to say what is noise? Like something that's noisy to one person is something that's super pleasing to another person.
They all can do anything.
Contemporary academic composition for the last
100 years has been centered around alternate types of instrumentation and incorporating different types of scores, graphic scores. Like when you get into academia, it's still there. You're still getting outside this box by playing a guitar and playing notes.
No. What the whole thing is, even though these different systems have been created, they're taught to be this thing. And that's fine, but to say that you can only do it this way is crazy to me. It's totally nuts. You can utilize that technique and do something else with it, but who's to say that that's the only way through?
And that's why I go back to bad teacher.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That was a great point. Did you go to conservatory?
No, I have no formal training whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't have formal training either. I did go to a school that had a great conservatory touch. I think it's also, I think your respect for academia also depends on what academia is for you. Like, I missed so much incredible music, so much incredible academic synthesizer music like that you were referring to before. Because when I went to school, the electronic music department was fucking around with data gloves, like Nintendo data gloves. I didn't give a fuck about that. They'd work on all this stuff and have it come out of like a FB01. It's like shitty sounding synth. And they had booklets in there, you know what I mean? So it's not as nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, it's all perception. And, you know, a lot of the time, people in these programs will perceive anything outside of that to be lesser or invalid. And what I'm saying is none of it is invalid. And to say that any of it is fucking crazy. Yes.
So, Mike.
Hello.
One thing to add to your point that I think about a lot in multiple sort of creative practices is that we don't have a lot of venues for people who do multiple things, right? I've seen you perform at music venues. You would think at a music venue, musicians perform there. But I've also, you know, like there are, so I feel like that kind of pigeonholes people, especially if part of your work is performative, you are kind of pigeonholed by the venues that are available to you. And so I feel like for me, it's exciting to see, to have my definition of music broaden in a music venue, but also to go to a museum or in a space that wouldn't normally sort of, well, I guess more and more now are presenting sound pieces and musical performances and have those definitions sort of blend into one another. But I think that's part of it too, is that we don't have a lot of physical spaces to like allow for those definitions to be blended together.
I think the thing for me that qualifies a modular system as an instrument is that it's still, people don't appreciate the time that's spent on learning it. You don't have to know music theory, you don't have to understand like everything that you would have to understand when you're playing guitar, but you do have to learn it. You have to learn it just like any other instrument. And you can also learn it from intuition and from self-discovery. Like you can understand that a major scale sounds different from a minor scale and a Mixolydian scale, and you can understand which ones of those you like better, which ones you feel in a different way. That kind of just, they totally go outside of like any former knowledge that you would be told.
I totally agree with that, and I see what you're saying. But I'm saying because the synthesizer your violin has however many strings it has, which I don't know, it could be 3, 4, 5. You don't say, I'm going to try 6, 7, or 8 string violin, and that's really what our modulars are. So I'm going to try to put an extra string in it, that's an oscillator, filter, or something else. And I agree, it's an instrument on a level, but it would be nice if we had maybe another term that doesn't, I'm putting some quotes, insult. People are playing these other instruments and don't want to view these as instruments and say, oh no, it's not like your violin in that sense. It's not an instrument that was created 300 years ago. What it is a blank, and it's just as valid as your violin.
What I refer to as instruments are something like the make noise sharing system, because it's complete in a way. And it is a system, and it's like that to me is an instrument, and I think that it's the same validity goes with I can't sit down at somebody's cello and play something that's musical, as they can't sit down in my make noise sharing system and play something that's musical.
I'm going to say this really quickly on that thread, and then I'm going to take that, and then we're going to be done because time is up. What I was going to say to that was, so you're talking about learning major and minor scales, understanding what those are, utilizing a synthesizer versus using a guitar. You can also use a guitar in a different way. I'm only talking about modular synthesizers right now because we're at a modular synthesizer fair, and that's the thing that I tend to use at this moment in time. A guitar, a cello, any instrument out there can be utilized not in the way that it was necessarily fashioned to be used. And what's that? Right, like a prepared piano is a prime example of that. It's a tool. It's all in how you utilize the tool to get through to what you need to see done. That's it. That's all that it is. You can discover things inside of a piano the same you can discover things inside of a modular synthesizer. There may be a little more limitation to a piano than there is a modular synthesizer, but the fact remains that you can still go different places with it. And so that's ultimately where it's at. Yes.
Well, you're talking about like the fact that it's like an ever-changing system. It could be like maybe considered apart from an instrument. But what I thought of was the drum set, which is one in which you can change. You can put extra toms in, you can put extra snares or extra cymbals depending on like what your musical tastes, right? Like how you play, and like it's kind of interesting because I think you see like it's something that developed very quickly. I mean, not to the same extent that modular synthesizer. But it's sort of like a modular. So it's an instrument, but it's like also a modular instrument.
It is a modular instrument, and it is an instrument. So
you consider like a modular.
Thank you. Okay, and then we finish. Yeah.
Run a violin through a guitar pedal.
Yeah.
And your violin is now
a modular instrument.
I hope this was slightly interesting. Stuff around.